All right, so this is video 4 on Sophocles' Oedipus the King. And here are our goals in studying Oedipus. And this is goal 4, quoting the Greeks and Oedipus for our own self-culture. So we're going to talk about 3 different readings of Oedipus here to try to get at the deeper meanings. One we will call the psychoanalytic reading, one we'll call the existentialist reading, and one we will call the costs of civilization reading. So in the psychoanalytic reading, we try to get at part of the root of ede means to know in Greek. And so he is a guy who's known for his wisdom. And if you think about the question from the text, what is the cause of your limp, right? This idea that we are always already hurt by something in our past. And Oedipus is brought in to solve the problem that Thebes has. His feet are already swollen personally. And Tiresias sets up Oedipus to go solve that problem. But those problems are already baked into the cake. By the time we can address them, they're already operative and have been causing harm for some time. And so the psychoanalytic reading of Oedipus is that what Oedipus really teaches us is that you need to go back to the real cause to answer that question. What's the cause of your limp? Whatever the limp is for any given one of us, right? To go back to that real cause and reinvestigate and relive the trauma that caused the limp. And so the damage is done. The doctor comes after the damage is done. The way to heal the damage is to go back to the origin, relive the trauma, and get on the right side of the trauma. The cure only can come by going back into the past and reliving what we went through in a different way a second time. And so added to this is the idea, right, that what really drives us is that trauma. What really drives us are these weird, chaotic desires. In Oedipus's case, to sleep with his mother, to kill his father, and that the eye that thinks it knows what it's doing is oblivious to the true motives. So again, from a psychoanalytic point of view, from a Freudian point of view, this is the key to understanding what Oedipus has to teach us. More recently, right, if you really want to spin it and do what's called positive psychology, you could do the same thing and ask, what is the cause of your jump? Not your limp, but your jump. What's the cause of your ability to excel? And you could go back and look at that. So your own family history is going to be a mixture of those two. What causes your limp? What causes you to jump? And to really go back and study the traumatic, painful conditions that have limited you, and the enabling conditions that have helped you. All right, on this reading, we'll call it the existential reading. You could think of Oedipus's answer to the riddle of the Sphinx. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, and 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening, and a man or a human? That's an answer, right? And that's sort of a true answer. What it leaves out is the fact that that's Oedipus himself, right? So Oedipus gives a generic answer without really understanding that he is implicated in his very own answer, right? He couldn't walk when he was little because of the trauma of his injury associated with his near-death experience when he was almost exposed on the mountain. So he's got swollen feet. He doesn't really understand why that's his name, and then he walks on two legs, but then needs support, right? He's at the end of the play, he's holding on to his daughter who is escorting him around. He can't walk without her because he's blind. And so having that conceptual understanding at just an intellectual level of being able to answer the riddle of the Sphinx doesn't really help him at an individual level. He still has to go through the reality personally of the answer that he gives. And so the limitations of universal knowledge and the fact that you always have to live your life and that nobody can live that life for you. You have to undergo your own life, regardless of how wise you are. And you have to undergo the pain, even though you had the universal answer. Part of this is you can't undo the past. So by going back into his past, he can't change it. He can only relive it, right? And he's capable of taking action to bring the past back now, right? So he can go back in his mind and think about what that was with that guy at the road where he killed him, right? Oh my gosh, that was killing my father. He didn't know that at the time, but he can go back and relive that and experience it a different way. Think how different it would be to think about marrying Jocasta, and the like. So ultimately on the existential reading, changing the past isn't possible, and even giving generic answers to human problems, that doesn't really help. The ultimate human achievement is actually to say honestly, this is me, and to own the actuality of one's experience. So not to change one's fate, but to actually just accept it and own it and to say, this is me. And so to tell a story, to tell a true narrative that gets at all the messiness of what one has done, knowingly, unknowingly, that is how you are existentially authentic, and existentially genuine. That is the highest point of responsibility. There's this world, it's an expanding fireball. It blew up 14 billion years ago, and all you can do is to accept your place in it in an honest way and not tell lies about it. And so finally now the costs of civilization reading. And there's three guys we'll talk about here. Claude Lévi-Strauss is a famous philosopher of the 20th century. You know, for him, the difficulty that this text teaches us is how hard it is to stay on 2 feet, of walking straight, of not being an animal, right? What are the costs of civilized life? How hard it is to actually be a human being, not walk on 4 legs like the other animals, not walk on 3, to walk on 2, to stay upright in a human life with human civilization and not fall into problems with the rules of civilization. In a related way, another philosopher of the late 19th century, Friedrich Nietzsche, who you might read, he's very famous. You know, to him, the big problem that Oedipus teaches us is that Oedipus actually, through his attempts to outwit his fate, he actually stumbles into all of these potential nightmare situations from a societal point of view. He doubles himself. He is both son and husband. You know, he is his own father's murderer, and he's a loyal son. He is the doctor who poisons the community and himself. He is the helmsman who goes into the wrong port. He's all of these. He's wise and he's ignorant. He doubles himself. He causes all these other people to double themselves, right? To double their roles in a way that civilization cannot handle. And so from Nietzsche's point of view, the true meaning of Oedipus is that wisdom is a crime against nature. That Oedipus does things and gets to a place of self-understanding that is simply impossible for society to tolerate. Society can't handle people who are both husbands and sons of the same person, of mothers and grandmothers who are the same person. Like, it doesn't work that way. And so Oedipus needs to get punished. And that brings us to René Girard, who wrote this famous book called Violence and the Sacred. And to Girard, violence is primary. It's the condition of nature, and civilization invents the sacred in order to overcome that violence, but that sacred is itself violent. And so for Girard, Nietzsche's right that society can't tolerate certain kinds of behavior. It needs certain sorts of structure, and therefore the people who violate nature have to be made examples of and have to be punished. And so for Girard, what Oedipus teaches us and why it's like the foundational text of Western civilization is that there are huge costs to civilization. It is hard to stay on 2 feet, that people just pursuing their desires, animal thrown into civilized situations, are going to do terrible things that are intolerable to civilization, and they're going to need to be punished. So that we invent the sacred, and we have to root out these people who do things that are not sustainable in civilization and expel them, and then we feel better. Right? Thebes can't function as long as this nastiness is happening, and they have to expel Oedipus. Well, Oedipus is just doing what seems totally normal to him, right? But look what happens. He has to be made an example of, because what seems natural to him isn't going to fly in civilization. It would be fine in nature, which is just a violent place. So civilization has to have sort of structured violence to overcome animalistic violence. And if you just think about all the ways that you don't get to do what you'd actually like to do, and refer back to that whole discussion we had earlier, you have a first nature that's really not suited for civilization, and you have to go through the costs of developing a self that's more suited for civilization. And René Girard and Friedrich Nietzsche and Claude Lévi-Strauss would say yes, and it's a costly thing, this civilization, and people are going to get hurt, and people are going to have to get punished, and that's the way it goes, and we need to be honest about that.